Serious, Redditors who've found a secret passage, tunnel, or room. What's your story? As an easy way to make side money to fuel my Warhammer hobby, flip furniture, items, and etc on swap shops. The above is relevant because due to the prominence of shabby chic and nostalgia, older furniture is super popular and easy to flip. Cool thing about old school furniture is that sometimes they have secret or hidden compartments, which I always try to find. I have found a few so far, and the most interesting one was a small compartment inside of a secretary with series of black and white photographs, dated from the 40s to as late as 57, of random places around town and people, who were mostly African American. I tried to locate the original owner or descendants to return the photographs, but the trail went cold after the second owner back had gotten the secretary from a pawn shop in the 80s and the former owner of the pawn shop didn't remember who had sold it to him. Long story short, I donated the photographs to a local museum. They display them as the sights of my town. It was really cool looking at evidence of how things had changed over the years. The old cars and fashion. It was quite interesting. I used to rent a house that had a fake electrical panel in the basement. Behind the panel was steel door that led to a panic room of sorts, built into a hill. The room also had a toilet and shower, along with a shop sink. There were fans that blew fresh air into the room from pipes leading outside. There was a huge 3D topographic map of the surrounding area on one wall. All of the electrical for the room was powered directly from the solar panels on the roof. The panic room had a secret panel of its own in one wall that led to a tunnel, culvert, lined with ribbon lights. The tunnel led to a false floor in the garage, so you could make your escape. The guy who built the house was a Y2K nut. That's pretty awesome, especially the map. My old high school was built in the 1800s. It is a very beautiful building that is 4 stories tall. There are lots of stairs throughout the building, and near one corner of the building are stairs that no one ever uses, very far from all classrooms. During my senior year, my buddy and I were wasting time just wandering the hallways, and we got to these seldom used stairs. We were on the bottom floor and noticed there were stairs leading down to another level below. We followed those stairs and noticed they led to a door which was cracked open. We went inside the door and it led to a large room filled with cubicles and dozens of employees on computers. The weird thing was, none of these employees were school staff. We were seniors. We'd seen everyone for 4 years. We were confused and we left. We tried to return a few times later, but the door leading to the room was always locked. This was in 2006, and I still wonder who the heck all those people were. Just some NSA stuff. I went down into the construction site under my religious college and went through the tunnels marked with radiation shelter signs. Then I came up into an actual abandoned chapel with an altar. The whole way to the cafeteria went right by it, but there was no way to get in anymore. Secret passage here to an underground storm bunker. Dallas can get some intense storms, so I had one installed. Keeps enough provisions for 4 people for 7 days. I have a beach house in Rhode Island. There is an old World War II bunker right next to the beach and all the main entrances are blocked off. There is also a decoy house a few hundred yards away. It was meant to look like an old weathered house, but was more like 2 pillboxes stacked up. Inside the decoy house's basement there was a hole with a later going down it into tunnels that led to the bunker. There are also many more tunnels that go for miles all over the coast to other bunkers and such, or just come out in random places, although most of them are locked. Me and my friends found them a few years back and we still use them as hangout spots every summer. It's a great time. The bunker is huge, probably around 10,000 square feet all under a giant hill, and it has many blocked off tunnels and paths inside. To this day it's one of the darkest, coolest places I have ever been. Just be wary of air quality in there if you go exploring the deeper parts. Masks and an air quality analyzer would be a good idea for an expedition. Did construction work and was often sent out of town for jobs. The company would cover the hotel and food. In Northern California, perhaps San Leandro, there was a hotel right off the freeway. The closet had a staircase that would lead you up onto an attic to where you could see in the people's rooms. Shady as frick. I did not go up there. A coworker did. When I lived in South Carolina, we had this house that had dormer windows. I was young, didn't own the home. I was a preteen. I didn't know the ins and outs of the house, but it was always a mystery as to how to get to the windows. I had an upstairs room, and where the window access should have been was walled in. Or so I thought. Turns out there was a hidden hinge door, a push-away wall panel. I found this by leaning against it and falling through. The passageway led to the dormer window, storage area, with a chest I never opened, and cut across the whole upstairs to the other bedroom which had the same thing. I used to work at Subway. Yes, I was a sandwich artist in Newcastle, UK. Anyway, the shop was just up from Castle Keep. Downstairs next to the freezers was this open hole of rubble, so dark you couldn't see into it very far. I was too scared to go down and didn't have a torch, but apparently it is connected to a series of tunnels underneath the city. I worked as an intern for the architecture and engineering department at uni and was assigned to work on a survey to make sure that the blueprints were accurate for every building. I get through maybe 80% of the work and then I have to go to the Army ROTC HQ on campus to do the survey. No big deal. Everything in the office was correctly represented on the blueprints, but the guy working the desk told me that there was a hallway behind the office. So he takes me back there and opens the door to a hallway full of dust, cobwebs and high windows on the right that disappear a few feet, and as the building is built on a hill. Dutifully, I go forward into the darkness. I can't remember if I didn't have a flashlight or what, but I went in there and all I could think was that I was going to find a body or something. So I just said that the blueprints were right and got the frick out of there. Definitely something you'd see in a horror movie. My manager found a secret room in his basement. Apparently there was a little window into this room covered by a large painting when they purchased the house. Inside of the room were random objects such as a refrigerator, a sled, a filing cabinet, and just a bunch of things. There was no door to this room and the window was too small to fit any of the stuff through it, which means the person who put the stuff in there built the walls around it. We are all convinced he needs to dig up the floor since it's gravel and broken concrete unlike the tile in the rest of the basement. There's definitely a body in there. When me and my brother were kids, we found a floor hatch in his room. It was hidden under the linoleum and really tightly shut, but we managed to get it open. Underneath was a flight of stairs leading to a single room with cement walls and nothing in it except a bed frame and a small table. The realtor who sold our family the house had no idea it existed, and neither had the people who lived there before us, or anyone else we asked. Still don't know why it was hidden or what it was for. The house is from the 1930s. My child brain at the time assumed it was where the garden gnomes lived. My high school was originally an all-boys training academy for Canadian soldiers during World War I. There was a tunnel built before the war under the school that connected it to other parts of downtown. Apart from the crazy high levels of asbestos, it is the home of dozens of piles of folders, records and letters all documenting the lives of World War I soldiers who trained at my school and ended up dying in World War I. It is quite spectacular and the tunnel itself is supposedly many kilometers long and super scary. My great uncle lived in a pretty larger house that had been connected in hiding fleeing slaves. He said he had looked around a lot but could never find anything. Basically one day my mom and I had gone over and we were helping with a renovation and tearing up some walls, and we found a pretty large hole in the wall leading to a cement wall which was in the basement. There used to be a room in the basement right where that wall was when my mom's cousins had inherited the house. Could totally have housed runaways. Just my great uncle. We found a doorway behind our refrigerator. No fun story though. The previous owner remodeled the kitchen and changed where the stairs to the basement are located. Instead of covering the doorway with drywall, they put cabinets in the fridge in front of it. We almost bought a house like that, except the stairs went to the attic. My parents' house had two. Well, sort of. There was an old basement that was structurally unsound, and so my brother and I were forbidden from going down there. I only saw it once. It was dark and damp. Sorry, that's all I remember. I was very young. When I was 6, my parents had it filled in and repaired, so all that remained was the cupboard under the stairs and a concrete slab. The upstairs attic was also our playroom. And a really cool playroom because it was the size of nearly the entire house, so a huge area. There were holes in the walls you could crawl through and end up in the void between our house and the neighbor's house. Nothing there but cobwebs and dust. After we moved out, the new owners converted it into a master bedroom. It doesn't really count, but in the garden was an old disused well that had been covered with a metal cover. You could pry it open and peer down inside. Of course we weren't supposed to, but we did all the same and somehow never became the next baby Jessica. They had that one secured and filed in properly shortly before we moved. Not so much a secret room, but more connections between closets. As kids, my siblings and I figured out that the closets in our basement were all connected. They were all in the same corner and the contractor had just never bothered to wall them off. Why not? They are just storage. This led to some very creative games of hide and seek, and also the ability to steal soda and ice creams from the spare fridge, which my parents kept in an otherwise locked closet. It took them years to figure out that we were getting in from the laundry and the toy closet. Kind of not exciting, but for a bunch of rowdy kids, very fun. It made laser tag super fun because it let us move between rooms and sneak up on each other. When I was a kid, my neighbors and I would play in houses that were under construction in our neighborhood. One house, I noticed that the area under the back staircase had been closed off by bookshelves. Then I pushed on one and realized there was now a hidden room there. I never got to go in after the place was finished, but I guess that family has a panic room, or just a little hidey hole. My grandmother married an old money lawyer about 20 years ago. Visited the house he had lived in alone for ages. This house has been in his family for many generations. Discovered a hidden door in his upstairs law office. You had to basically crawl to fit in it, and it would take you about 30 feet and led to a hidden door behind a plant, which was just over a staircase. I found out later that he had some unsavory characters as clients over the years, and the escape route was so he could get to the lower level of the house and run out the front door if he had to. On the same trip, while taking a crap, I noticed an original 13-star US flag nailed to a bathroom door in the basement. Literally, an original threadbare flag in a damp bathroom that probably only got used once or twice a year. I mentioned to him that he should probably find a better home for it, and he was genuinely surprised, not realizing original flags are kind of a big deal. A year later I heard they had it professionally framed and gave it to a museum, so there's that. In the same basement there was also a land grant laying on a table personally signed by either Grover Cleveland or one of the other presidents from that era. Old money types are freaking weird. I go to a university in Ontario, Canada that was built in the 60s. The whole campus has a series of steam tunnels and old pedestrian tunnels that was used when the school opened so people could get around campus indoors. At some point the tunnels were closed, but over the years people kept finding ways in to explore, party, graffiti, some their reefer cigarettes, etc. One of the older Frat bosses for the arts students used to take first years he deemed worthy on little excursions through the old tunnels. He knew them well, and by the end, the Frat were always so disoriented with the maze of steam tunnels and back stairwells that he would finally take them to a door and open it, and they would be on the roof of one of the tallest buildings on campus. This is the same university where they found the tunnel dug in a forested area on campus, complete with sub pumps, generator, and lights. A lot of friends knew the guys that dug it, and it was just a bunch of engineering students. The police and media were worried it was tied to a terrorist plot on the Pan Am Games being held there that year, but it was just used by students to smoke weed and hang out in, primarily just cause they could. My friend and I found these tunnels at our boarding school. They were basically crawl spaces, but every once in a while they would open up to bigger spaces where you could get comfortable. There was writing in one of these bigger spaces indicating that other students of the past had found the tunnels as well, but only about every 10 years or so. There was a note from some who had snuck out of school to attend a Grateful Dead show in the 70s and others from the 50s and 60s. We discovered the tunnels in 2006. They ran all over the school, which was a great way to sneak around. My boarding school had strict rules about guys visiting girls' dorms and vice versa. The best part of all was a tunnel we found that led directly into the school's dining hall. We would often take whole cakes or bagels and cream cheese, anything, really, back to our dorms, and our friends never had any idea how we did it. I took photos at the time, but sadly I lost them all. At my local bookstore, there's a hidden room. When I was younger I didn't have money to buy any books, so I'd go into a back room on the top floor that had an entire shelf dedicated to Sherlock Holmes. One day I was reading one of the books and I thought it would be hilarious if there was a fourth wall behind the bookcase. I stood up, walked to the shelf and gave it a push. The bookcase pivoted and opened up into a very Sherlock-esque study room. There was a collection butterflies on the wall and a microscope and slides on the desk. It was really exciting to find. I went back a week later and tried to enter again, but it was latches or something and I was never able to go inside again. As a kid growing up, I lived in a small town in western NY, about an hour south of Rochester. Town name, Naples. A friend and I were exploring his basement and we found a boarded up tunnel. Looked like a boarded up window. There was a cord of wood stacked in front of it. We finally got the boards off and discovered a hole that went about 30 feet under the house toward the road, Main Street. We asked his parents what it was and they told us it was a link to the old underground railroad that slaves used to escape to the north. Actually to Buffalo and then across the Canadian border. We did some research at the town library and from everything we could find it appeared to be true. I guess there once was a network of tunnels under the town and this house was on top of one of the pathways. Madison Wiss. I met a college girl that was living in a defunct frat house. They had lost their charter for reasons I didn't know at first. We fell for each other and I moved in with her. It was a great apartment complex with pool tables and giant showers. One night when we were drunk she took me to a room that was empty. It had 2 bunk beds and above one bed was a secret door hatch. It led to an upstairs room where most of the hazing took place. The story goes that one night during a party in the dead of winter a girl was violated by a gang of some of the frat boys. They just left her up there in the cold and she ended up dying from freezing to death. One of the frat boys was so distraught by the incident that he went up there one day and painted her picture on the wall. Then he hung himself. While we were up there I could swear that the eyes on the picture would follow you around the room. And there were reports of crying coming from up there some nights. I never went up there again. My brothers and I saw a dark spot on top of a mountain in northern Israel. Thought it might be a cave. Decided to explore. It indeed was a cave, man-made, and was surrounded by many other caves hidden by the natural features of the mountain and the overgrowth. It ended up being that we stumbled upon a Jewish settlement that existed a couple thousand years earlier. On top was the biggest cave, presumably owned by the head of the community. We also found burial chambers and individual living chambers. We found a lot of pottery shards as well as a 7-foot tall, 5-foot wide, and 2-foot thick stone door that had engraving of grapes and nobles and stuff. It was pretty freaking cool. Found an old disused train tunnel in South Wales with loads of burnt out cars from the 70s 80s. Dad and I think it was part of an insurance scam business. After reading The Magician's Nephew as a kid, my sister and I wondered if our townhouse attic was connected the same way. My parents assured me that they weren't, but one day we climbed up into the attic. No ladder. You had to stack milk crates and chairs, and climbed over the rafters to find that you actually could go into one neighbor's, who was an older woman and had 2 daughters, one married, attic, and we snuck in and went through our neighbor's attic crap and found out that A, their light fixtures were too small for the holes and B, the unmarried daughter was fricking her sister's husband. My little sister, who was 7, was mortified to see someone fricking that she cried in church because she thought she was going to heck. A childhood friend lived in an old building that had been remodeled a long time ago. A lot of the apartments were made from 2 apartments that had been merged together. There was a back hallway that wasn't used a whole lot, but we discovered the door that pulled down the attic steps. The attic was just a wide space over all the top floor apartments and we found secret panels in the floor that led into what was now the kitchens of the apartments below. There were a bunch of very old liquor bottles in piles all around. He also found a secret compartment in his bedroom closet that was just big enough for a person to hide in. They remodeled when I was in my teens. Before that the hallway and lobby had red carpeting and red and gold velvet flocked wallpaper. My mom told me it had a history of being a brothel, which makes sense, but I never did any follow-up sleuthing. I used to work for the local phone company. There was an old mental hospital in my town. Had like 30 buildings on it, but most were closed and abandoned. Only 3 or 4 still were being used, but the main phone lines for the whole complex came into one of the abandoned buildings, so we'd be let in there to do work. What we found was all of the buildings were connected to each other through a series of underground tunnels. We'd each do a little exploring, but it could be easy to get lost, so I never went too far. One of my co-workers decided to go and see as much as he could. The tunnels had no lights. Deep in one, all of a sudden he finds a guy standing in the dark crying. He freaks out and starts to slowly back up. Then he hears people calling out a name. He realizes one of the patients had wandered off and gotten lost. The guy was actually more scared of my co-worker than the other way around. He yelled out and they came and got the patient and warned the worker to not wander into tunnels anymore. TLDR. Co-worker found psychiatric patient in a tunnel under an old mental hospital. A friend of mine rented a house near the university in town. Not sure when it was built, but anything that still worked hadn't been replaced. Old fixtures, original flooring. It even still had the original coal cellar, complete with piles of coal, and pulley system for bringing them up from the basement. Upstairs they were all sealed off during subsequent remodels, which was only accessible via trapdoor in the back room, converted into laundry facilities. However, there was also a small door in the bathroom, very subtle. You would have assumed it had a built-in ironing board or something, that actually connected via super narrow passage to a hidden door inside the master bedroom closet. Not very exciting, but very handy for rescuing drunk people who locked themselves in the archaic bathroom. More of a forgotten room than anything. I was working for a hospital that had expanded with an extra building, and part of the basement in the original building had simply stopped being useful for anything. I got sent down there one day to check out a particular room and see if it had enough power sockets to make it useful for a backup crisis management office. I don't think anyone had been in there since the 1970s. There was texture wallpaper and thick carpet, which are two things you're not likely to find anywhere in a modern hospital. There was also a thing in the corner that looked like a real old computer, which had add-on boards made of components fixed to balsa wood soldered directly to the motherboard. It was labeled fire control and still powered on, so I didn't touch it. Past that room was a tunnel which was only secret to the public. Across the road from the hospital was a medical school. That tunnel made it possible for them to store their cadavers in the hospital morgue. The tunnel had hot and cold water pipes and gas lines running along the ceiling, so it felt like a sauna in there. The rumor at my college was that there were tunnels connecting all the original buildings on campus. Small campus. Long story short, I got my hands on a master key and went looking for the tunnels. Turns out, the story was true. In an old utility closet in the basement of the main building, there was a hatch in the wall. Ignoring the asbestos warning, my friends stayed at the entrance and I went in. It felt like it went on forever. This concrete tunnel big enough to sit upright in. There were pipes running along the top. Metal pipes that probably held wires, not plumbing. It didn't fork but one time, and eventually I hit an end. A wooden hatch like the one I came in. Pushed it. I was in the basement laundry of the nearest dorm. Between the asbestos and the long crawl, I never went in again. I figured I'd gotten lucky once, and that was enough. At my grandparents' old country house, there was a removable piece of board in the back of one of the upstairs bedroom closets, and behind it was a small passageway that led to an open space with a window on the side of the house. I crawled in once and only once, because on the way out I glanced to the side and realized the corners of the corridor were filled with giant freaking huntsman spiders. Like, a dozen palm-sized huntsmen. And that was just the one corner. Frick that. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.